5-Watt World is supported in part by TrueFire. Learn, practice, and play with TrueFire. Hi, this is Keith Williams. Welcome to 5-Watt World. We're interested in helping you get the most music from the least gear. It seems every time that I make a short history video about one of my favorite artists, I find myself tripping over the fact that they played a Les Paul special at some point early on. I ended up learning that some great guitar tones, something I'd loved for years, was played on a special with those glorious P90s. They create a unique sound that I've always assumed was a really good Les Paul standard, but no, it was those P90s. The two players that stick out in my memory are Pete Townshend from Live at Leeds, or probably the most important guitar influence of my late teen years, Carlos Santana's Live at Woodstock performance. In both of these cases, I didn't know that a P90 driven guitar was the sound that matched the tone in their heads, and then that sound became stuck in my head as well. I just never knew it was a Les Paul special. See, if you want to know more about the unique qualities of these guitars and the people that played them, then stay tuned, because this is the 5-Watt World short history of the Gibson Les Paul special. If you enjoy our videos, make sure to subscribe. If you've already subscribed, grab a hoodie or a Stomp preset pack to support what we do. And if you want to be a bigger part of 5-Watt World, think about becoming a friend of 5-Watt on Patreon. The links are in the description. The first Gibson Les Paul guitars were of course released in 1952. Issued with the problematic original trapeze tailpiece and bridge design that would be corrected in 1954 with a new wraparound tailpiece. That year, Gibson expanded the solid body guitar line with added models both above and below the classic gold top. 54 saw the introduction of the Les Paul Custom, a model that Les Paul encouraged them to do in all black so that his hands would stand out against the guitar on black and white television to highlight his playing. The Custom carried the new staple-style P90 in the neck, but had the standard P90 that was shared across the entire line in the bridge. That year, Gibson also launched a model below the standard gold top, the Junior. The Junior was priced at $99, which was deemed an acceptable price for a student guitar. It had an unbound, flat-top mahogany body with a brown to yellow sunburst finish that was simpler than was typical at Gibson at the time. There was a single P90 pickup in the bridge position, along with a volume and tone control. The bridge was the same new in 54 wraparound as the higher-end guitars. There was an unbound rosewood fretboard in the Gibson standard 24 3/4-inch scale carrying dot markers. And the headstock had a simple gold Gibson decal rather than the plastic mother of pearl logo on the gold top and the Custom. It's pretty obvious that this guitar was heavily influenced by those upstarts at Fender that were selling so well in their simple slab body and bolt neck Telecasters. The Junior was also very successful, with Gibson records showing that 19,035 were built between 54 and 1960. If you add in variations like the Les Paul TV, which was released later in 54 in a downsized 22 3/4-inch scale length, there were well over 22,000 guitars shipped. By 55, this TV model with its limed yellow finish would move to the standard 24 3/4-inch scale and simply be a finish option in the Junior line. But also in 55, on the heels of the success of the Junior, Gibson launched the Les Paul Special, a more mid-priced guitar. It was introduced in the same lime mahogany finish as the Junior TV. The most obvious difference was that the Special carried two P90 pickups, along with the additional controls and the three-way switch that was required. This gave it the same pickups and control layout as its gold top and Custom Big Brother guitars. Unlike the dog ear mount P90s on the Junior, the pickups were the soap bar style that were used in the gold top on that special. They also gave it a bound fingerboard and a pearl Gibson logo on the headstock. The tuners were simpler 3-on-a-side plate Clusons with white plastic buttons like you'd also find on the Junior. All this provided the Special with visual clues that it was a step closer to the gold top. It was listed for $182.50, a price closer to that of the gold top than to the Junior. Not surprisingly, at this lower price point, the Special sold better than the gold top. In 1956, the Special's first full year of production, Gibson shipped 1,452 Specials, 3,129 Juniors, but just 598 gold tops. Though the guitars were at a lower price points, it would be wrong to consider Juniors and Specials from that era anything other than professional quality instruments. The guitars were primarily hand-built on the same lines in the factory at Kalamazoo Mission as the higher-end guitars. They were built with the same lightweight Honduran mahogany backs and necks, and with Brazilian rosewood fingerboards, same as the higher-end Les Pauls. They also had the same coveted Central Lab pots and oil-filled Bumblebee capacitors. By late 55, the new Tune-o-matic bridge appeared on the Gold Top and Custom, but the Special retained the wraparound bridge to help delineate its lower position in the line. Like all the guitars during this time, they were rough cut and then hand finished, so there were variations from guitar to guitar, but in general, the necks became smaller as the 50s wore on. But again, this is a generalization, as the necks are all sizes across those years. And this is, of course, the unique qualities that are the charm of vintage Les Pauls. The Juniors and Specials were mostly stepping stones for guitarists in the late 50s, but in the 60s and 70s, top players in many genres would embrace the Special. Carlos Santana used a single-cut Special before later moving to a 60s SG-shaped Special. Ron Wood famously used a 50s Special with the Rolling Stones, while Keith Richards used single and later double-cut Juniors. John Lennon is often cited as using Specials, but in fact, he had a mid-70s reissue Junior with a Charlie Christian pickup added in the neck. Jazz and session great Larry Carlton set down his 335 and reached often for his 57 Les Paul single-cut Special that was completely stock. That's the guitar he used on Live at the Greek with Billy Cobham and Stanley Clarke, or in the 1990 Live at Montreal Jazz Festival video, working the neck pickup much of the time right through his Dumble rig. Bob Marley bought his Special at Top Gear in Denmark Street, London. The shop had bought the guitar from American guitar repair guru Dan Armstrong, who was living in England at the time. Dan had added the block inlays on the fretboard, modified the finish, and bound the headstock of the reissue guitar. Used by Marley from that point of May 1973 until his death, it was said to be his all-time favorite electric guitar. Dean DeLillo used a Special in the Stone Temple Pilots. Ben Harper can be seen using his 56 Les Paul Special on the Austin City Limits episode from 2016, and Brazilian jazz and pop artist Gilberto Gil used a Cherry single cut from the early 70s onward. The release of the humbucking pickup in 57 was the big news for the Gold Top and Custom. The Special was purposely left with the older style P90 pickups and wraparound bridge. Gibson moved in a double-cut direction with the introduction of their semi-solid guitars in the ES335 family of instruments in 58, and in the middle of 59, the Special morphed from a single to a double-cut model as well. It also moved to the new cherry finish as standard. The Special was in its last years of the slab mahogany construction, and even the name would be tweaked before the end. The change was very popular. Shipments jumped from 958 guitars in 58 to 1,821 guitars in 59. I reached out to TrueFire to be my sponsor because I've used them for years. With over 2 million users worldwide, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level player, TrueFire has lessons to enhance and inspire your playing. Get 35% off courses using the promo code 5watt35, or like I do, sign up for the All Access Pass to use the entire TrueFire catalog. I really like TrueFire, and I think if you give them a shot, you'll like them too. Sign up now to start your journey to being a better guitarist. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. Late in 59, the headstock would go from saying Les Paul Special to Les Paul SG. SG standing for simply solid guitar. Fully 2 years before the restyling of the Les Paul standard model into the pointy style we think of when we say SG today. The new double cutaway Special body provided easy access to the upper frets, and this required a completely new neck-to-joint design. But this structure is still much more solid than we'll see with the later SG style. Of course, the selector switch now needed to be moved to the lower bout down by the volume and tone knobs. The other change around this time were the changes to the P90 pickups themselves. Gibson used Alnico 3 magnets until about 57, when they moved to Alnico 5. But again, nothing was completely true at Gibson during these transitions. John Gundry of Throwback Pickups told me that he's seen Alnico 2, 3, and 5 in the pickups of various years, likely due to the availability in the marketplace. So these are generalizations again, and parts were certainly pulled from bins and transition times, mixing magnet types in single guitars. And finally, remember that there were no auto stops on the winding machines, so there's a good deal of variation on how strong the pickups were, either in the bridge or the neck position. This is particularly true in the neck position, that can go from a classic jazz tone you'd expect to hear from a 50s Gibson archtop to the snarling overdriven P90 tones we heard from R.J. Ronquillo in the introduction. Gibson's P90s from the 50s are particularly sensitive to pickup height. John Gundry recommends setting them as close to the strings as possible to bring out their unique qualities. This is possible because the construction of the pickup does not create as much magnetic pull on the strings as other pickup styles. Along with many other guitarists, Johnny Marr used both single and double cut specials. Mark Knopfler used a late 50s double cut special with a B5 style Bigsby just prior to finally buying his red 61 Strat. Known for his white Les Paul custom, Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols also used a late 70s Sunburst double cut special reissue. Jerry Garcia is famous for moving between different guitars in the early days of the Dead, and he used a vintage Les Paul special in TV yellow finish in the summer of 1971. And a guitarist that had a great influence on me in my early years, Martin Barr of Jethro Tull, used specials and juniors on many of the early records. Though we now view the 58 to 60 Les Paul standards as the apex of the Les Paul legacy, at the time, the move from the gold top to the sunburst finishes did not save their sales numbers. In response to the flagging sales, in '61, the world saw an entirely different Les Paul guitar launched. The new design would only share the pickups, hardware, inlays, and Les Paul name. Everything else would change. The Les Paul standard name itself only lasted from '61 and '62 to describe the style. Even those are now referred to as Les Paul SGs. The slightly asymmetrical pointed horn design of the SG screamed heavy rock, even if it appeared 10 years earlier than the genre itself. I outlined the full change in the short history of the Les Paul and in more detail in my video on the SG, so here I'll outline the changes in just the special model. Many of the features that differentiated it from the Junior, like the bound fingerboard with dot inlays, followed along. Like the previous double cutaway special, this is still a solid mahogany body and neck. The P90 pickups remained, with the neck pickup pushed slightly further down into the body to help strengthen the fragile neck joint. This new exposed neck joint allowed for a certain amount of neck whip, the type that hand vibrato we'd hear from Pete Townsend or Bill Frisell later on. There was the multiply small pickguard of the early 60s SGs, and 3 on a side Kluson plate tuners are still there. In 1960, Sprague ceased printing stripes on their capacitors, instead moving to simply printing the value on the capacitor in red on the black. Though nicknamed bumblebees, due to the stripes that indicated the capacitor's value, Sprague always referred to these capacitors across all those years as black beauties. Besides the cosmetic differences, the construction changed over time as well. The earlier caps are paper and oil construction, and the later ones are mylar film. But this difference did not occur with the cosmetic change. That would be simpler. You can tell the paper and oil bumblebees from the later caps by the small oil tube on the end of the cap. Both styles are highly regarded, but they are not constructed exactly the same, and it is always hotly debated whether they make a difference in tone. Cue the comments below. Launched in that quintessential Gibson cherry finish that was used on the backs of the Sunburst Les Pauls, by '64 the specials were also being made in custom colors, including most commonly Polaris white and Pelham blue, but also in black, sparkling burgundy, Inverness green, and ember red. In addition to custom colors, you could also order the special with a Maestro Vibrola at the time. Les Paul's endorsement contract with Gibson expired in '62, so no Les Paul signature models would be produced again until it was renewed in 1968. In the middle of '66, Gibson changed the SG-style guitars to the new Batwing-style pickguard. The SG Special this time was fitted with the short Vibrola tremolo, the first move away from the wraparound bridge as standard. In this form, the model would be in the line until 1970. These wonderfully light and tuneful guitars were embraced by many players in the late '60s. Pete Townsend of The Who is likely the most notable user of the SG-shaped specials. It's said that he would buy up all the specials he could find while out on tour in the late 60s and 70s because though he loved their lightweight and the biting P90s, they were rather fragile for his rough and ready onstage style. He can famously be seen playing them live at Leeds and on the Live at Isle of Wight festival. And Carlos Santana played an SG-shaped special in his band at Woodstock. Supposedly hopped up on acid during the show, the band was not at its best, but the recording saw heavy rotation at my house growing up. Robbie Krieger of The Doors used both a 64 and a 67 special, and Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath would famously use a modified 64 special, nicknamed Monkey, for a sticker. In 71-72, Gibson reworked the special model, rebranding it as the SG Pro. All controls were fitted on a control plate, and this was clearly a bid to lower costs of manufacturing the model. From 72 to 77, they again produced a guitar named the SG Special, but with a stop tailpiece and mini humbucking pickups. In 73, the dot markers were changed to small blocks. The 80s saw Gibson floundering around reusing old names for guitars that had no trace to the original lineage. Such were the SG Specials of 83 to 90, with 2 humbucking pickups, unbound fretboard, 2 volume and 1 tone control, and a stop tailpiece. From 91 to 2012, they built a stripped-down SG named the Special that had the back wing pickguard loaded with uncovered humbucker pickups along with an unbound fingerboard. Overlapping these, though, was from 99 to 2010 was the SG Classic with a batwing pickguard, 2 P90 pickups, a bound fingerboard, and a Tune-o-matic bridge and stop tailpiece. In between, there have been a smattering of other models that in one way or other resemble the Special. But in 2019, we saw something much like the original in the SG Special, which remains in the line to the present day. This guitar has the cosmetics of the original 60s Special with the P90 pickups, wrapped tailpiece, dot markers, and bound fretboard. There's also an SG Tribute model in the Modern series that carries many of these features but adds batwing pickguard and a Tune-o-matic bridge setup. This summer, my first post-COVID car trip took me to Nashville and Atlanta, and I spent the last bit of it with my friend Rick Beato. We worked on some things together, but inevitably there were times when he was busy and I was left to find a guitar and play some. It was a month before the official release of his signature special, and he had prototypes there in the studio. With all the guitars he has there, it was these specials that I found myself playing again and again. Rick tweaked the design slightly with a thinner body and even thinner finish to add resonance, but it's the sound of the P90s and the unrestricted access to the top frets that makes the Special Rick's guitar of choice. When Gibson asked him what he'd like in a signature guitar, he could have chosen anything. A crazy flame-top Les Paul or a jazz box for that side of his playing, but he didn't. He prefers painted tops and tends to judge his guitars on how they feel in his hands and how they sound. I looked around at all these guitars in the studio, and in true 5-watt world fashion, I couldn't help but ask him, if you had to do it all with one guitar, Rick, which would it be? He didn't hesitate. He simply lifted the blue guitar that was already in his lap and answered, that's easy, this one. If I forgot your favorite player, leave it in the comments for everyone to enjoy. I need to thank RJ Ronquillo for his permission to use his playing of the special style Grez Fulsom in the intro and outro of the video. I'd like to thank Carter Vintage for permission to use clips of vintage specials that have come through their doors in the last few years. Until next time, this is Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5-Watt World.